Good morning, everyone, and welcome to XBOSoft's quarterly webinar. And for this quarter, we're doing a little bit late, but we're still having it. It's November, and here we are today with Kevin Pyles. We're lucky to have Kevin with us. Kevin's going to be talking about the pitfalls of QA metrics and how to overcome them. So welcome, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. Just first, a little bit about XBOSoft. We were founded in 2006, and all we do is stuff related to software quality, anything from consulting and helping people to determine metrics, like some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, as well as execution, so actually getting the work done, anything from writing test cases to executing them, doing test automation, performance testing, and so on. We have offices in Beijing and China. And just before we get started here, let me go over a couple house rules. Everyone is muted except for myself and Kevin, but you can enter in questions into the chat panel as well as the question panel for the Zoom webinar app. We will be recording the webinar, and you can also see that there's hashtags there. You can hashtag and ask questions on Twitter. And for any questions that we don't get to, we will answer them on our blog. Just a little bit about me. I'm the founder and CEO of XBOSoft, and I'm going to be moderating today. But really today is about Kevin. So let me introduce you to Kevin. Kevin is a director of QA at Domo, and I met Kevin a few weeks ago at Hustaf, and Kevin was one of the speakers there, and I was lucky enough to be able to spend some time with him and learn a little bit about his passions. He loves AI stuff and machine learning, some of the newer type developments in software testing, and he's also into video games. I didn't know you were into video games, Kevin.
Thought I'd throw in something different for you.
Okay, well, I'll let you take it away from here and talk about pitfalls and metrics. So let's get going here.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. All right, I'm going to set the stage here a little bit because metrics to me don't sound all that exciting, to be honest, but they're so vital. And the reason that I found them to be vital is the situation that I found myself in many times as a QA engineer. You're gathering around for that big release, and this release has been coming forever, and you think as a QA engineer that you've been sharing this message with everybody. We're not ready, we're not ready, we're not ready, there's a lot of bugs, whatever. But you show up to this go, no go meeting, or final sign-off meeting, whatever your team may call it, and design signs off, dev signs off, management says that they're ready to go, and you're sitting in the corner thinking, how did this happen to me? I'm about to be the bad guy. And I thought I had done a good job sharing the metrics and the data around this, and you realize maybe you didn't. Maybe you hadn't shared all of that data with everybody. And because this has happened to me before, I was looking for the answers to the most important questions that I could come to this meeting, this sign-off meeting, and say, okay, we're not ready. And I could be that guy that shows up and says, here's all the data we are not releasing. And I don't know, QA somehow thinks that they have this power that they can do this. And then I realized, what'd be way, way better is if we had data and we provided that data along the way and everybody was aware of the data, so that when we got to the release meeting, everybody just said, yeah, we're all good. We've seen the data. Everybody's ready to go. Or we don't even need to have the meeting because we have the data and we know we're not ready to go. Today, hope is with this webinar that we can share some of the pitfalls, why maybe this doesn't work, and also how we can overcome that and show how to make it work. The agenda is showing off the pitfalls, and then I put answering questions. And so I'll use this as two ways. One, any questions that you have out there in the internet world, please share along the way. And I've invited Phil to interrupt me at any time with any questions that are relevant to a slide or the topic at hand, as well as there are questions that your managers are going to ask you as QA engineers, or maybe you are a manager, and these are the questions that you ask and you wish that somebody would provide the answers for you in real time. And so we'll talk about those questions. And then finally, we're going to do a short demo of how Domo can help you create your ultimate dashboard. You could do this with another tool, but it's so much easier and so much faster, I've found, with Domo. And so I'll show off Domo and how we can make that work.
Hey, Kevin, a couple of things is that I forgot to mention that I will kind of be representing the audience. So they're going to be entering in questions, and I'll certainly interrupt you when I can and ask those questions. And the other thing is that I certainly have been in some of those rooms where you have those meetings and you don't want to be the bad guy either, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a really tough position.
Really, as a QA engineer, you're hoping to just provide data and kind of get out of the way, let the data speak for itself, let the bug count speak for itself. But instead, maybe it's something we do as QA engineers, or maybe it's just our jobs. I don't know. But we end up being the bad guy a lot.
Right.
So hopefully today we can help provide some ways to overcome maybe that stigma that we have,
right,
and also just provide some good information for everybody throughout the project.
Yeah.
All right, here's just a quote to help us get started. Statistics is the art of lying by means of figures. And I think too often when I'm looking at articles on the web and I see statistics, I can't help but pick holes in the statistics and say, yeah, but you're just using that part of the statistic and you're forgetting the rest of the statistic. And then with that, this week I had no idea when I was putting this webinar together, but this is a special week for Half-Life, and the cake is a lie. And thinking about that this week with statistics, and we put things in front of people, and is it a lie or is it the truth? Another quote: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I think, again, with QA engineers, I don't know, we just get away with so much. We only count certain things, and what we should really do is find metrics, data that provides value, and then have discussions around that. I'll keep bringing that up as a repeating theme throughout. And then this is a quote. I didn't put who said this because I made it up. Metrics are valuable until they aren't. And I think too often we hold on to these metrics for a long time and think that they're valuable over the years, when in reality they had value and they no longer add any value. But we're holding on to them because at one time they were valuable, or maybe they show something that we think is important, but it just really isn't anymore to the project. All right, so what are these pitfalls? Let's go through these pitfalls. The first pitfall is what I'm calling data cliffs. So how do we fall off the data cliff? First off, we may not have enough data. Second, we might have the wrong data. Maybe we thought we had it, but we don't. And third, we may have outdated data. And these may initially seem, I think they seem pretty basic. If you don't have enough data, you need to get more data. If you have the wrong data, get the right data. If it's outdated, then get updated data. But it may not be quite that simple. So how do we overcome this? First off, you may not have access to the data. And again, basic is just ask for the access, right? But sometimes we don't even know what data we need. And so we haven't ever asked for access to the data. In fact, yesterday I was talking to somebody who didn't have access to data that was in Jira. And I thought, oh, you've got to have access to this data. How are you making judgment calls without Jira access? And so again, just asking for access or asking for that data. Maybe the data isn't in a place that we'll say it isn't accessible, but maybe it just hasn't been created, right? We haven't curated this data, and we need to start curating the data. An example of this would be running automation. Maybe you just got started with your automated suite and it's all running locally on your own machine. You don't have a reporting tool yet. And what you need to do is just start gathering that data. You run your automated suite, you keep track of the metric, you put it in a Google Sheet or somewhere, and you start to gather that data over time. And this can be very valuable, although painful, it can be very valuable over time. And then again, to overcome this, maybe you don't have enough data, maybe you don't have the right context. you need to continue to generate that data. And that can be either manually, if that's how it's happening, or you may need to just wait. Maybe you implemented a new tool and you just don't have enough data yet to know if this data is valuable or what direction you're really going. So that's another way to overcome these data cliffs. I would assume that anybody who's listening intently would have other ideas of data cliffs that they run into, and also some other ways to overcome these data cliffs. I think a lot of situations are very different. So these are some general rules. And with the other pitfalls, I may address some of the other thoughts that you may have around data cliffs. So if there are questions, I'm happy to take them, but I think we may address some additional thoughts as we go through the other pitfalls. So pitfall number 2 is the context spikes. What is this? Do you have enough data? Again, this is kind of overlapping that previous pitfall. And are you sharing the context? And rather than talk about this, I want to actually show an example. And this example is that classic moment when somebody runs in and says, oh no, we have 20 bugs. And so you show the data, right? You're doing a great job. You gathered the data, you have the bug count. Maybe you were using Jira, maybe you're using a Google Sheet or whatever. And you're like, check it out, we have 20 bugs. We are in so much trouble because we have 20 bugs. Well, I have a lot of questions around that random number that you've generated for me. For example, is the bug count going up to 20? Or maybe it was going down to 20? And so the context around the data is so important. I'm sure you've been in that situation where you've seen a metric and you go, yeah, but is that a good thing or a bad thing? So ask that question. Does this metric provide enough data? And in this case, you can see all I did is I changed the chart type, and I now have the context that I need. In the chart on the far left, yeah, this looks like a serious concern that we are up to 20 bugs. On the chart on the right, we're down to 20. Hallelujah, this is fantastic. Let's ship. We're in a great spot. So providing that context will really help. Here's another example. And Phil, I actually think you used a pretty closely related example in Hustaff. So with this metric, it looks like we have a super productive increase in our automated test count, right? So this is going up. You can see we have increased our test count by 200%. Way to go, team. This is fantastic. If you can see at the very bottom of this chart, it's a little bit hard to see, but there's like a squiggly line at the bottom of the chart, those little columns. That means that this isn't all of the data. And you can also see that there are no numbers around, the X and Y axis. So we have no idea what this chart is really showing. Now, when we look at the full chart, we can see that, first off, there's not a lot of automated tests for this team, but they had 8, and they've grown just significantly. Oh, wait, it's only 25% more, and it's really only 2 more test cases. So again, context is so important to provide. Also, as QA engineers, this will help you poke holes in statistics and metrics that other teams are using. I don't know, I'm kind of evil that way, and I try to think of how to poke holes in everything. So when you see a chart, you can start looking at what pitfalls do they have, and what are they really sharing with the team, and is it as dramatic as they may make it out to be?
Well, I think also, Kevin, you're kind of talking a little bit about the difference between a measurement and a metric as well. And
yeah.
One of we did have a question that came in, I'm sure you're going to get to it, but it says, for a team that's just starting on publishing and sharing metrics, what are some key metrics to start with that are easily available and have importance? And I'm sure you'll get to it later on, but I just want to put that in the back of your mind.
Absolutely. I will share what are my favorite 3 charts in a little bit. And I believe they answer everything. Okay, they don't answer everything, but they answer a lot of questions that your team and management will have. So yeah, definitely, that's a fantastic question. We'll get to that a little bit later. All right, let's move on to pitfall number 3. And this is going bananas with color. And what does color tell you? I'm just going to show a bunch of examples of color. And this is what I like to call the bumblebee dashboard, because to me it looks like a bumblebee. And if most people don't know this, but I have a terrible fear of bees. And so this chart gives me some serious anxiety. And for most people, it may not. But you need to get to know who your audience is and determine if, for example, a black background is a good idea. And is it a good idea to give the impression that your chart is a bumblebee, which for me gives anxiety, which might be a good thing. Or you may want to provide maybe some different colors that don't provide that anxiety. And again, this is context centric, right? Kevin gets anxiety when he sees a chart like this, where somebody else may get excited when they see a chart like this. Here's another example. As I was actually putting this dashboard together, I had somebody looking over my shoulder and they said, "Whoa, that feels hot." And that's exactly the impression that I was hoping for in this scenario, but you may not be going for that. I call this the heat chart or the heat dashboard. And again, as a QA engineer, this may not be the impression that you want to give to your team, that everything is always on fire. You may want to save that for the right moment, and then maybe change all of the color for your dashboard, or maybe never use this color scheme. The opposite of the heat chart is the cold chart. For those of you who may be from warmer climates, this may give you anxiety as you think about how cold it is. For those of us that are in colder climates, especially for me today, this starts my mind going on winter and maybe the holidays, or maybe a new movie that's coming out, but it gives a different impression. And then there's this one. And again, I think that this is a beautiful dashboard. I think it looks good. I think it conveys messaging really well. I think it's easy to read. I'm not colorblind though, and you can see blues on blues might be difficult to see. But more important is I just want to go on vacation. And again, that may not be the impression that you wanted to give to your team. Back to a bumblebee chart, we've added or a dashboard, we've added maybe some more text around it. And then this one is the black and white dashboard. It actually looks a little bit like a zebra. You can play around with this by adding a picture in the background. For example, what I really wanted to go for was the moon. And so maybe you're working towards some new goals. You're saying, team, we're going to shoot for the moon. So you add a picture of the moon in the background and people get excited about this. Maybe you want to change that picture as you change the theme or the project or whatever you're shooting for. And of course, this one is just fun because it's a zebra on a zebra dashboard.
This is really interesting. You know, I've done some work with user experience, and if you use different colors, they convey a different message. But I'm just wondering now, when you look at dashboards, what kind of colors would just be neutral that nobody, would get upset about bees or being warm or things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the one that I'm showing now is a little more neutral. It's got, again, neutral gray. It's not the stark black. It's not stark white. It has a little bit of color to it, but the colors aren't standoutish, right? I'm not calling attention to any of these metrics. What I am doing is allowing you to view the metrics, hopefully in a way that most people can read. Again, it may be something that you adjust the color slightly so that you could do the color test, right, to make sure that everybody can see the contrast here. But I'm not using bright colors. I'm not using your reds. I'm not using even the yellows. And so this to me is a very neutral dashboard, but this may not provide the excitement, right? Maybe this is too boring for your team. And so you start out with something like this, and then you adjust it over time. For example, I'm going to use one more, and this back to the black and white thing with the moon background. But in the far right corner, you can see this red. And at our company, red has this really, really strong connotation. So if I put, especially here, where I put a little bit of red, this draws attention at my company, maybe in a bad way. In this case, I want people to see that red, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but we're not ready to ship. It definitely calls attention to that metric on this board, right? If it's the only thing that's red. But red also could be bad. And to your point, Phil, I looked at the definitions of what these colors mean or represent. And green is interesting because if you look at this, it represents money. Well, that could be a good thing, right? Maybe you don't want that to be the negative color on your chart. Maybe you want that to be a positive growth, as it says. Whereas red, I like that it says war on there. And that's exactly what would happen if I showed this chart to my team with red on that chart. We would be going to war. And I may want that. I may not want that. Yellow, it's interesting here that this actually says very happy feelings and sunshine, which is true, but it's also, for our teams, it's a little bit of a warning sign as well. And then finally, green or blue. And this, I like that it's intelligence. I have no idea how I'm going to use that in my charts, but I'm going to look for some examples where in the future I can use this nice blue that represents intelligence and creativity and add that to my charts. Yeah. So that's the going bananas with color. I think just giving examples is better than talking about how to overcome them. For your teams, you need to pick what colors matter and what colors don't. Is it using colors that represent your company, or is it representing your project, or is it representing war and money? And does that help for your team? I will also point out that you can try out a color. And for example, I used red one time, and I immediately had the attention of my team, which was great. I determined that red was going to do that. But I also needed to be careful in the future when I used red. Maybe I wanted to change that to a yellow and not draw as much attention to myself or to my team. All right, pitfall number 4, holes in visualizations. And this is just around charts. Which chart should you use? Which chart is going to convey the correct message? And again, I think an example will be the best way. Now, I think people are going to have lots of examples where the wrong chart was used. Maybe you've even done it yourself on your own team, where you created a chart. You were so proud that you had created this chart. It may have taken a lot of work to gather the data, to use Python or Excel to create the chart. And then you realize that people read the chart or can't read the chart, and they get the wrong message. And this is an example of that. This pie chart is security bugs by day. Nobody wants to read this chart. It is so hard to figure out what is really going on with this chart. Whereas if I pick the right chart, for example, this chart, this is showing that our bug count between November 1st and November 25th is dropping dramatically. Oh, well, that's good information. Great to know. Think good job, team, and all that. But that chart on the left, I just had no idea what was going on with that chart. Again, I think there's a lot of examples of this, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. The more important thing is picking the right chart, and with just a little bit of Googling, because every situation is different, you can find out which chart you should use in which situation. For example, this chart that I'm using on the right is great for showing over time, and the chart on the left is great for showing grouping or percentages of the pie.
Yeah, Robin, one of the folks in the audience brought up that red, green, and yellow have an intuitive meaning in our society, but don't necessarily work for colorblind folks, and that's something else to keep in mind is the colorblind factor.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially when you're looking at what you think is a beautiful dashboard, like I showed earlier. I had blues on top of blues. And that just may not work. The contrast may not be good enough. Black and white normally works, but I've had people say, oh, please, no black and white. Like I get enough of that, or it's so boring. Please change the color to something else. All right, pitfall number 5, the ice of vanity. And I think we've been here, and unfortunately too many of us have had managers that use vanity metrics. And an example of these vanity metrics is the bug count. And once again, I'm going to use a couple of charts to show how this happens. We create this chart, and it's just tracking the bug count. And look at Ray go. This tester is amazing. He is finding more bugs than everybody else combined. He is finding them, I guess, faster. I mean, I don't know. But Ray deserves a promotion with how many bugs he is finding. And unfortunately, this happens too often. especially with QA engineers. We have a manager who says, I don't know how to measure you guys. So what we're going to do is we're gonna keep track of the bug count. And whoever logs the most bugs, you're gonna get a gift card, a bonus, whatever. And so we end up with a Ray, and Ray gets the gift card and destroys morale for the rest of the team. Well, if we add a little bit of color around this particular metric, again, let's add that context. We see that Ray did log a lot of bugs, but he also logged a lot of very low priority bugs. Notice that those are mostly P3s and maybe one or two that were P2s, whereas Winston, Peter, Lois, and Janine, they logged a lot of P1s, a lot of P2s, and very few P3s. Their time was better spent, possibly stuck on some big bugs that took more time to, find the root cause. And while they were busy improving our product, Ray was out there just causing more work for everybody. And then one more thing that's interesting is as we add additional context around this, Ray, this chart might be a little bit hard. I threw it together a little last minute, but Ray, you notice, is all of those tall orange bars on the left. Ray was fired on October 27th, so he actually hasn't logged a bug in the last month, but he still shows up on our bug count as being the most productive QA engineer, but really he was just a nuisance, and so we got rid of him. Okay, that may not be true, but you can see
like
how
Ray
the
too
metrics can throw you off. What was that?
You don't like Ray too much, huh?
No, really, I just don't like this metric. I don't like tracking a bug count. I think it's not as productive as other metrics.
Sure. And what do you think about assigning a weighting to different types of priority bugs that people find? Would that kind of cure this and make it more meaningful, or do you think that's the wrong way to go?
So if you recall my quote at the very beginning, metrics are only valuable until they aren't. And I think, for example, in this case, if this is like a bug bash and you're just trying to find as many bugs as you can for an hour because you want to get the team together, you want to find those last bugs, and you're just trying to track how many did we find. This is great. And you could do a little contest where you say, okay, P1 bugs are worth 5 points, P2 bugs are worth 3, and P3 bugs are worth 1 or something.
Right.
But after that hour, you really need to let it go and move on to maybe a better metric. For example, and I'll show the bug arrival rate is much more important for a team than this individual bug count. Now, what I do like about this bug count by individual is it can provide some insight as to which testers are doing what. Where are you working? Just want to have a conversation. Again, that may not be bad, but I'd like a conversation around that data. So maybe that person has been pulled off. Maybe they're working on automation now, and they haven't been the one logging the bugs. I noticed that for me as a director manager now, I don't log a lot of bugs. So if somebody were to come in and say, okay, well, Kevin doesn't provide any value anymore because his bug count has dropped dramatically, you would be right. Based on this metric, I don't add any value. But the hope is with these metrics is that we're having conversations around the metrics and that we're not coming out and judging people or firing people over a metric. It should be a conversation starter.
Well, you just fired Ray, didn't you?
Yeah, but that was a different reason. He was a bad employee all around.
All right.
Yeah, he was just causing havoc.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Pitfall number 6, the fog of invisibility. So what is this? The metrics that no one ever sees. Too often we have a lot of data and we just don't share it. And we need to, again, QA has a lot of metrics, by the way. For example, we have Jira, we have our test case management system, we may have automation out there. And so we have these metrics. Now, maybe we haven't gathered the data to be able to share it, which was one of the previous pitfalls, but just never sharing that is really bad for us. And I'm gonna talk more about this with the demo, but it may be that you just don't have a good way to share the data. So again, we'll talk about that in a minute. So here are the pitfalls. I'm not going to go over those. You all can view those. Maybe I'll share this slide on Twitter or something so we can remember what the pitfalls are. All right. Question was asked, what metrics should I use? Now, the question was, if I'm getting started, what metrics could I use to get started? And I'm going to argue that these are the metrics that you should use if you're starting or if you have been in the industry forever. Because as I've discovered, these answer a majority of the questions a majority of the time. Not all the time, not all of the questions, but these are the ones that are going to help you, I think, the most. They will provide the most bang for the buck. And a reminder that metrics should be used to start conversations, not confusion. All right, first question that you should be asking and that you will definitely be asked as a QA engineer is, should we release? Well, one of the metrics that you can use is the bug arrival rate. So in this case, again, the context, as you'll see on this chart, is not very good. We don't know if this is 3 bugs or if this is 300 bugs. But what I'm trying to show here is that the bug arrival rate is increasing. If the bug arrival rate is increasing, you should have a conversation, but it's very likely that you're not ready for a release. All right, so a chart that looks like that with that line going up probably shouldn't release. On the other hand, if your bug arrival rate looks like this, you're probably feeling pretty good about a release. Now this one is the bug, I call this the deceptive increase. And that's because, again, we don't have the context. We need to provide a little bit of context for the company, team, business to make a decision. And in this case, goes from all the way up to 2 bugs. And 2 bugs may not be an alarming rate for you to hold up a release. So please provide that information as you share this type of metric with your team. All right, so again, go ahead.
Sorry, Kevin, I was going to say, isn't there a lot of context that would go into a bug arrival rate? A lot of things affect that other than the presence of bugs, really.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one metric that you would want to have to help start a conversation. Again, okay. I don't believe that there's one metric to rule them all.
Right.
But if your conversation is, should we release, and you bring this metric to the table and you say, look, our bug arrival rate is, and again, it's either up, it's going down, it's maintaining, that will provide some really good context for a decision around should we release. I also argue for QA engineers, it's best to stay out of the decision of should we release. It's better for us to say, well, here's the data. What do you think? So if the bug arrival rate is going up dramatically, hopefully your management is saying, oh yeah, well, that's scary. Let's wait until it goes down. And I found that my managers have always responded in that way. It's been, oh, okay, well, what type of bugs is the next question? And then let's wait a day or 2 and see if we can get this bug count to start going down or if you're continuing to find bugs. Okay, the next question, okay, this is, again, evil Kevin, but I love showing this chart because this shows where the bottleneck is, and it's rarely QA. And I know that marketing all over the place is saying QA is the bottleneck. Well, that's not my experience, but I can give you a chart that will help your team see that you are not the bottleneck. How do we do this? It's a simple chart. This shows where the balance of the tickets are at. So again, we use Jira at our company. There's lots of other ticket systems. So the ticket status right now, you can see we have about 9 in the design phase, we have 9 in the development phase, and we have 8 in the QA phase. This is a balanced, this is like Kanban perfection right here. This doesn't normally happen, but this is great. So if you have this, congratulations to your team. Everybody is equally balanced and you're all working on the project. Good job. What normally happens is something more like this. For most of the project, design gets to spend a whole bunch of time planning out what the product will look like, designing it. It looks beautiful. It goes through tons of iterations with management, senior management, executives, and then finally makes it down to development, and eventually we'll make it over to QA. So this is probably 75% of the project looks like this. And then the part where we get busted as QA engineers is at the end of the project, the last 2 days. In my case, it's the last day of the sprint. It looks like this. And this is the only time that it feels like manager looks at the metrics is on that last day. Why? Because we're deciding if the sprint is a success or not, or if we should release. And what we need to do, as I stated earlier, is share what is actually happening throughout the process. So share this chart with your team at the beginning of the sprint and say, hey, look, QA doesn't have any tickets right now. And then day 2, when you show up to stand up, show it again and say, hey, reminder, QA has no tickets assigned to them yet. Day 3, day 4, day 5, QA still has no tickets, which means we're not the bottleneck. And what's going to happen is after the first or second sprint, the team is going to realize, hey, we got to get QA some stuff early so they can start testing earlier in the sprint rather than waiting until the end of the sprint. Again, you use your metrics to start conversations, not to create confusion. So if you have discussions around this, then over time, your team will find better balance. Don't be the jerk that causes the problems or causes the confusion or frustration. Instead, provide this information as just information up front and help your team see. All right, and then the third chart that I like to use is how does QA feel about this release? This is the gut check card. And you can use whatever image you want. Again, I think somebody mentioned that in our society, we're going to say the United States, other societies might be different. Green has a particular feel to it, and so green is go. And then yellow is hold up, or for some people it's go faster. I guess it depends on the individual. And then there's also red. Again, what's happening here, and Phil, this is kind of to your point about the earlier charts, is it doesn't really provide all the context with those earlier charts. What's valuable is sometimes having that gut check. So I may actually have a chart, a bug arrival rate that's going up. And I may feel just fine about the release because I know that those bugs that I just logged are very minor and I haven't found any other bugs in the last week or 2. On the other hand, I may have just found one bug and I know that that bug is going to, once it's fixed, it's going to reveal a bunch of other bugs. And so that one bug has me feeling really bad about this release. And again, this chart is fantastic if you can help your team understand what it means to you. And again, have those conversations ahead of time so you don't show up on the day of the release and you say, nope, we're red and the bug arrival rate is low. And they're going, well, that's because you don't know how to read a chart or whatever else. No, this is here. Let me explain how this chart works. Another thing that I do is this chart is always green until it isn't. So I don't leave it empty or I don't not have the chart, or a lot of QA engineers would say, no, it should always be red. I never feel good about our release until I do. For me, it's always green unless I have some reason for it to be something other than green. All right, so those are the 3 charts that I recommend using. And I would like to demo in Domo how to create these 3 charts. And a little bit of context, for me personally, I didn't have a good way to create these types of charts previously. And I left previous employment, came to Domo, and within 15 minutes, I had created a dashboard that had more than those 3 charts, but it had those 3 charts. And it was so cool to be able to do this as quickly as I did. And well, there's so many benefits to Domo, but one of the great things is I can create this chart using data from just about anywhere. So for example, if your data is coming from Jira, we can pull in data from Jira. If your data is coming from Google Sheets, we can pull in that data from Google Sheets. And as soon as you update that data in Google Sheets, we can have Domo pull that data from your Google Sheet. And I think it's set to like every 15 minutes. So someone would argue that's not real time. Trust me, compared to not being able to get that data rounded up for weeks, 15 minutes is incredible. And you can actually set it to faster uploads or download times for other tools such as Jira or a database connection or whatever. So I'm going to show you quickly how to create a dashboard in Domo. This is Domo. This is I'm going to share the link to go download your own trial with Domo. But this is what you'll see when you first come into Domo on a trial version. And I'm going to come in here. You just click on this universal add button, and I'm going to create a new dashboard. And we're going to call this our quality dashboard. And voila, I have a new dashboard. That was pretty easy. I have no idea how many millions of lines of code it takes to create all of that behind the scenes, but it's great to be able to hit a couple of buttons and have a dashboard. All right, so now I need to create those charts that we were discussing before, right? So the first chart is the bug arrival rate. Now, I could use Jira. You can go to our app store and we have connectors to Jira and other places, Google Sheets. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to use a CSV file. And so I'm going to create a new card. And so you just come up here, create a new card. I'm going to create a visualization and I'm going to upload a CSV file. So I'm just going to select that button. And voila, I'm right here. I can go through my files, find the file that I'm looking for. And in my case, I want this bug arrival rate. And there you go. You can see how simple this CSV file is. I actually created it in Google Sheets and just exported it to a CSV. It's showing my bug count per day. And then what's going to happen here, I'm going to call this my bug arrival rate, is this is going to upload my data into Domo. So while it's taking just a second to do that, our goal is to create a chart that's going to be the bug arrival rate over time. And so you can see it actually guessed really well what my chart, what I wanted it to look like. I could leave it at this. So this is just showing you the bug count per day. And you can see I have some obvious trends. It looks like I don't work the weekends and I find bugs during the week. I like to show, again, the over time. And so I'm going to come over here and change this to a line chart. And then I'm going to change this to, I didn't select the line chart. And so I'm going to show that with the line chart and show you that count. And then, you know what, for now, I think I'm just going to leave it like this. I like this chart, actually. I'm going to leave it like this. So let's just leave it like this for now. And then I'm actually going to remove this because I may not have a total of 60 bugs right now. So I'm going to say I don't want a summary number that's counting everything. And I'm just going to save and close that. You can change the title of your card. Again, you can see that we have a bunch of different charts. We'll save and close on here. And voila, I have this chart that easy, created in Domo. And I'm going to edit this dashboard so I can actually make it look prettier. You saw how pretty some of my other charts were. So I'm going to take, there's lots of things you could do here. On the right-hand side, I can add a card, kind of placeholder over here. And since I have this card down below, it'll just pull it in. I can drag and drop as well. All right, so I've created a bug arrival rate chart. And then the other chart that I wanted to create was based on our ticket system. So again, super quick, just create a new card. I'm going to use a visualization. I'm actually going to use existing data because I've already imported this data in here. And I'm going to use that. Spare everybody a little bit of time. And then in here, what I want to do is, I'm not worried about the created date. What I actually want to do is I want this to be based off of the status name. Remember, this was design, development, or QA. And then I don't care about this at all. So I'm going to remove that. And now I can see, again, just that quick, I have 26 open tickets, and this is the distribution. And I don't care about the A on there. This is just my ticket system. And then I'm going to save and close that. And voila, I have this new chart. And once again, if I want to move that, I can easily move it up next to the other one. This time I'm going to do the drag and drop thing. So I'm just going to drag it up here and put those next to each other. All right. And then for the sake of time, what we're going to do is we're going to add another card. And maybe somebody else in your company has already created a card. And actually, I'm not going to create it. I'm just going to add a card that already exists in my system. So I can come here, I can edit this dashboard. I can drag over this card. So again, just a placeholder so that I can have the 3 cards here. It's going to be an existing card. And then the one that I want is the gut check card. So I'm going to find one of these gut checks, and then I'm going to add that. And now I have my gut check. I can also add a title to this particular collection or layout. And so this is going to be our QA status. Again, be more creative, come up with something fun. And then I want to change a background. Remember, color is important. So we're going to go with a neutral gray for now. That's kind of fun. Or a lot of people like to add a picture to the background. So you can come in here and change that picture to something more enticing. I have a Domo background since we've worked for Domo. So there you go. I've now created the ultimate quick dashboard. I did that in much less than 15 minutes. And I can now answer, again, a majority of the questions that will come at me, especially when it comes to a release time. All right, let's switch back to our slides here. And again, these were the charts that we built. And here, just a couple of additional ticket or charts that may be of interest to you. You may want to show your automated tests over time, how they're increasing. You may want to show a release calendar. And sometimes people like to show who the tickets are assigned to so that we can see, hey, we're waiting on Ryan or Carl or whoever to finish up their work.
I was just wondering, is the gut check something that's manually that you do in terms of red, green, and yellow, or is that determined by something automatically?
Yeah, good question. And I didn't show how I created that data. I just use a Domo form, and basically it's just a spreadsheet online. And yeah, I put in a 1, 2, or 3. So 1 is green, 2 is yellow, 3 is red. And with that chart type that I'm using, that smiley face, it can be a smiley face or an orange not so happy face or a red angry face. And it's just based off of those numbers, the 1, 2, or 3. And yes, I manually change that because, again, sometimes that bug arrival rate, that might be a good indicator that I'm, not ready for release, but it might not. And I don't want it to automatically change to red because I logged a whole bunch of P3 issues that we may or may not need to fix.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me like if you're presenting these dashboard to management, or if they were looking at it on a daily basis, that might be the only thing they look at.
It might be, yeah. If you, so if you look at just these 3 charts, and I do this for all of my teams, by the way, we just have these 3 charts. And these 3 charts I find are so easy to look at that your managers are willing to look at them. I don't know how many people have, Phil, maybe you've had this problem where a manager comes in and says, I need this data and this data and this data. And you go, it's going to take me forever to gather that data. And it's a big deal, right? You have to come up with all this data. And so you spend who knows how much time away from actual work trying to gather data, only to have one question asked. And then nobody looks at those metrics again. They're outdated in no time. And you spent all of this time and you thought that those would be the important charts and those important data points or metrics, measurements. But really, they just needed to know the answers to these questions that these charts provide, again, most of the time. What I do recommend is adding an additional chart, again, metric, that is important for now, right? That one metric that everybody's tracking this week or this month, and then delete it when you're done. So after that month, when you've achieved the goal, delete the chart so that you don't have to worry about it anymore, and it's not a burden on everybody's shoulders, and it's not what you're shooting for anymore. All right,
right.
Quick plug again. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess you would have would you have a different dashboard for a different type of executive or manager?
I actually don't. Now, what you can do in Domo is you can filter the data. So I could come on this page again, and we can add filters. Now, I don't have this set up for teams right now, but I could have all of my teams. So I could have Team Dragon, Team Cobra, Team Scorpion, and they all bring in the exact same data. And all I do is I would switch between the teams so that I could see which teams are ready, which teams are not. Or again, for quick, easy view, I actually just duplicate these tickets on the same dashboard. So I could see on here, again, I would put right here, something like Team Dragon. And then I would copy these and I would put below, I would have, Team Frog or whatever.
Right.
And then I would just have these tickets or these charts duplicated. Now, again, it might be better for your team to do something different. That's the power of Domo. You don't have to do it exactly this way. Each team does have their own dashboard with other metrics that they follow, but for QA, we use these metrics. Okay, again, I'm going to put in a plug that what I've shown you in Domo is very, very, very small compared to what it can do. We can bring data from all sorts of different places using our connectors. You can visualize using hundreds of different charts. And then the share is where I found the most power. It's great that I can get all my data into Domo, but if I can't share it, it's of no value to me. And the power in Domo for me has been, I can see this data on my mobile device. In fact, Phil, this is how you saw my data all the way over in Budapest. I just pulled open my phone and said, here's my charts. These are the charts that I use every day. And it's available on, web, Android, iOS. We even have an Apple TV app. If you have that TV that's sitting there that you wish you had your dashboard up on that TV, you can use Domo to put the same metrics up on that TV. And when people walk by, we do this at Domo, people walk by, they see the data and they go, what? My team did what? Show me that data. And they see it and they're able to make changes because of that. So that's some significant power. If your executives use Domo, for example, for their marketing team, their sales team, for their executive team, finances, then you can slide your metrics in as well and have the QA metrics sitting there with all of the other metrics for the other departments. And they don't need to buy another tool. They don't need to download another app. They use the same Domo app that they're using for all of their other metrics and dashboarding tool needs.
Yeah, I'm just wondering for Jira. I mean, Jira is so powerful and it has lots of stuff in it. I was wondering, do you just collect the log files out of Jira?
You could get the log files out of Jira. For us, we use like all of the bugs, who logged it, what team it's on, the dates, epics. We do tons of stuff with Jira. That's like another hour-long webinar on just what Domo does with Jira internally.
Right.
I'm sure other teams would like to do other stuff with it as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, and then one more quote. Statistics can be made to prove anything, even the truth. I think, again, we've seen ways that you can really foul up your data by not sharing the right data. But if you share the right data, you can help with your releases and that go, no-go meeting to make a clear statement of where you feel the quality really is. Thank you for your time. And again, you're invited to download a trial of Domo. You're invited to use these pitfalls at your own company. And hopefully this will help teams get started with some basic metrics that can maybe clear up some confusion and stop some of the negativity around the QA go, no-go release meeting.
So who do you work for, Kevin? I forgot. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and talking about these pitfalls, because I'm sure that we all have them. And just to close up the webinar here, the webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, and it's great to have you, Kevin. Thanks very much, and we'll see you, our audience, hopefully we'll see you in the next quarter. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
All righty.